Donald creates the fumble. Goff goes crashing into the end zone.
It is intercepted by Jalen Ramsey.
Robert Wood, touchdown, LA!
Picked off by John Johnson.
Caught, touchdown, Tyler Higbee. It's Michael Brockers who gets there.
A'Shawn Robinson.
Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air.
Taylor Rapp, who had one taken away, will take this into the end zone.
Henderson with a good run and a first down, still on his feet.
Safety in the arms of Leonard Floyd.
Up top, touchdown, Van Jefferson.
Terrell Lewis.
Everett in stride. Wow!
Hit behind the line, Terrell Burgess, 26.
At the goal line and in for his second touchdown. Malcolm Brown into the end zone.
Abu Khan with the strip sack.
Picked off by Troy Hill.
Akers with a stiff arm. Akers into the end zone. Cam Akers.
LA will play for the Lombardi.
All right, guys, welcome back to another Downtown Rams podcast. It's episode 309. I'm your host, Jake Ellenbogen. Joining me, as always, is Alexis Kraft. And joining us, we have a very special guest from The Athletic, your favorite Rams reporter right now, Jourdan Rodrigue. How is it going, Jourdan? So glad, you were able to come on here. I know you're very busy. We really appreciate you coming on our show.
Well, you guys have been so great, and thanks for the warm welcome. I can't even tell you how excited I am to be here. Been using the word stoked a lot, so that maybe I'll fit right back in my West Coast roots here. But I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really excited that football is happening on a tangible level. So this is all really, really great for me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're excited to talk to you. And, I'm really excited to talk to you about Rams football. But before that, I'm just kind of want to ask a couple questions, about your career up until this point. So relatively new to the Rams, but what have you been doing up until this point?
Yeah, so great question. My career, when I mentor young journalists and when I speak to classes and stuff, I always tell them there is no set path in journalism. You sometimes follow a very winding path, and that was mine. I did major in journalism at the Walter Cronkite School at Arizona State. Go Devils. But I wanted to write, and I just sort of dug my heels in on writing. And my first job, I kind of panicked because there were no jobs. College students who are graduating or have graduated understand the struggle. There just were no writing jobs. And so I was sending my resumes out everywhere. And I took a job up in Seattle covering the Seattle Storm. I was working for the WNBA, covering sort of from an in-house perspective. And it was a dream because I got to work with Sue Bird, and she was one of my idols growing up, and it was so great. But I knew I wanted to be a beat writer because I had followed, some great beat writers, not just from my hometown in Phoenix, from the Arizona Republic, but also I was one of the really weird kids. I got a subscription to the Los Angeles Times because I loved Gary Klein and Sam Farmer and Bill Plaschke, and I'm sorry to all those guys for aging them now, but I really loved reading them when I was, in high school and entering college. And so I knew what beat writing was, and I wanted to be one. So, after my job, it was a sort of a summer job situation because the WNBA is only playing in the summer. And I moved back to Phoenix, and I took like 6 or 7 odd jobs. A couple of them were writing jobs. Some of them were just to pay my rent, like composing emails and things like that for companies. And, my hours were crazy, and I was just trying to get my clips out anywhere I could. And again, sending resumes. I must have sent like 200 resumes out. Finally, this really, really kind editor in Center County, Pennsylvania at the Center Daily Times, he was a big March Madness fan, and he saw one of my games that I covered when I was covering Arizona basketball. And he called me and asked me, how would I like to come cover Penn State football? So several excited expletives later, I was like in the car driving to Center County, Pennsylvania. I had never seen snow. That was the first time I saw snow, was that winter. I covered the post-scandal start of the James Franklin era for, 2 years. And then I always joke I got drafted into the NFL. I went to Charlotte, started covering the Panthers. I joined The Athletic almost 2 years ago. Well, I guess I just had my year Wow, time flies, guys. I had about my year and 4-month anniversary, and they knew that I wanted to come back out west, and it's been a dream of mine for a long time, and they were kind enough to help me, get here, and I couldn't be more thrilled to get here. So, like I said, it's been winding. I've driven the country up and down and sideways. So, if anyone needs road trip tips, I've got you covered at this point.
Well, I'll say this, moving from upstate New York to LA, at some point down the road and pretty soon, I'll probably need those tips, but
I gotcha.
Appreciate it. But moving on though, and I still want to talk about your career before we get into the Rams. You come over from the Panthers to cover the Rams. Now, I want to know what you think is like the biggest difference between covering the two. And obviously, you haven't covered a full year of the Rams, so I get you have way more experience with the regular season and things on that nature. But have you noticed anything off the bat that would be considered a big difference between the two?
Yeah, I don't want to jinx anything here, but it sort of tickles me to death. Like I seem to have missed all the drama. So in Charlotte, it's like the Panthers are the biggest show in town, and had Ron Rivera there, well beloved in the community, all of these veteran players so beloved in the community, and then the Jerry Richardson scandal hits, right? And then I cover a team sale, and I'm like running through hallways at owners meetings trying to get an interview with this billionaire who's going to come buy the team, and it's like you don't know what the journalism struggle is until you bust a heel chasing after a billionaire in Florida. That sucked. So it just, then you have the drama of the investigation into the team, and then the new owner comes and he fires everyone on the business side and hires all these new people, and then he gets started over on the coaching side, and there's injury drama on the field, and then they start getting rid of all these really beloved veteran players, and Cam Newton, who's like the most electrifying player I've ever covered, he gets hurt, and then that's the franchise sort of is teetering on the brink at that point. Then Ron Rivera gets fired, his entire staff gets fired, they bring in all new people, so it just really, there was so much drama. And it happens everywhere from time to time. It's the drama of great change. And so now I come to Los Angeles and covering the Rams, it's like, it's very calm because everyone's pretty stable. I mean, I know there's your natural coaching changes, but the big uprooting of the team moving back, that was, I think, the big drama. And then Todd Gurley, obviously not knowing what was going on with him, but that this is like normal football drama, like coaching changes and will they be good, and efficiency and decision making and all of that. And so it's kind of nice. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. It's like I get to focus on football. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there definitely was a period of time there in Carolina for the Panthers that was really a lot going on, kind of like you mentioned, the scandal and the firings and all that. So I'm sure that was pretty intense to cover. And yeah, you're right. It seems like for the Rams right now, it just seems to kind of be business as usual, which we can't complain, because typically that is a good sign in sports, for sure. But something that I'm curious to ask you is, I'm sure that as your time working as a writer, you've gotten to interview a lot of really, really cool people, players, coaches, etc. Is there any one that stands out to you, any particular interview, or maybe a couple interviews that kind of stand out to you as being the most interesting or the most significant in your career?
You are amazing for asking that question. Thank you for asking that. That's like, people don't ever ask that. That's fantastic that you would think of that. I will tell you a funny one and then a serious one. So the funny one is when I was a kid and growing up in Phoenix, the Cardinals, being mercurial, to put it politely, in terms of, their ability. So, but they would practice up in Flagstaff, and, I was a Arizona State Sun Devil from birth. And so Jake Plummer was like big when I was a kid. And I used to be in Flagstaff, his first camp. I remember as a kid, I had a big piece of paper and a pen in my hand, and I was literally running after his golf cart as he was riding on the back of it going into practice, because I was like, please sign, give me your autograph, please. And he couldn't because he was on the golf cart, but I didn't understand that as a child. So I'm standing there as he's slowly vanishing in the distance, watching this very small child sobbing because she couldn't get his autograph. Well, fast forward, almost probably, God, it would have been 15 years later. And I was working for the athletic department as an in-house writer when I was in college. And I got to interview him. And I told him what had happened. And I was doing it lightheartedly. But he took it so seriously. He was like, "Oh my gosh, I crushed you. I'm so sorry." And he was so nice about it. And it was just delightful because, how the heck would he remember something like that? No way. But I brought it up kind of as a joke. And I was like, "Oh, I finally caught up to you." Like the nervous, like young reporter jokes that you make when you're trying to, lighten the room a little bit with the subject. And he was so nice about it. He was a great interview. But probably the most impactful one, I would say I had so many impactful moments with people in Carolina. I can't speak highly enough of that organization and how good the players were to me and how good the coaches were to me. And I think sitting before Ron was fired, I was sitting with him for a project where we were going over all of the letters that he had kept from people over the years, his time covering the Panthers. And, just understanding really and fully that everybody who goes in and out of those buildings, they have this sort of deification cast over them, I think, by society. And that's fine because I really appreciate fandom and its passion. But the human element of this is so often forgotten in what we do. And the human element of just the spectrum of emotions that these guys go through on a daily basis and managing all of that. And then you add in physical performance, which is so often connected to what your brain is telling you at any given moment and what your heart is telling you. And so being so much deeper than what you see just between the little white lines on the field every day is so important to me. And my conversations with Ron Rivera really, really hammered that home for me.
Yeah, those are both incredible stories, first off. And the Jake Plummer story, I especially love because that kind of reminds me of me and Kurt Warner a little bit because Kurt Warner, obviously I grew up in St. Louis and he's like a hero around here. And I'd run into him here, but I had never been able to manage to say hi to him or get a picture in or anything like that because he was always surrounded by people. And then Jake and I recently had him on the podcast and that was the most, it was the most,
I love it.
I know it was the most full circle moment for me, just talking to him for, half an hour, 40 minutes or however long the interview was. And I was just I never as a 8-year-old child would ever think that this was happening. But it is really cool when you have moments like that, with your heroes and everything.
That's fantastic. I love that because he is so down to earth, isn't he? And he just, it's like you're talking to someone you've known forever. And that's fantastic. I love hearing that. And you totally get it. That's the full circle. You're all of a sudden you're 8 years old again. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. You can ask Jake. I was freaking out. I reverted back into my childlike, I was I don't know if I can do this interview and not freak out and fangirl the whole time. Cause I did that with Dick Vermeil. And I think I was fine with Kurt. I don't know. You'd have to ask Jake, but it was really crazy. It was I was so nervous the entire time.
Yeah. I mean, I thought you did pretty well. I mean, I'll admit, living in upstate New York, I was a huge Kurt Warner fan just growing up and loving the Rams. So when I interviewed him, I felt that because kind of similar to your story, Jordan, with Jake Plummer, except I didn't get the autograph, but I got the picture. So he took a picture back when he was with the Giants. He had a training camp at Albany and now Albany University. There's UAlbany. There's nobody comes up here anymore to do training camp. So it was kind of this once in a lifetime opportunity back when Eli Manning was a rookie. And I had the picture with Kurt Warner, and then you move forward all these years and I'm interviewing him. I thought that was just pretty incredible, but moving on though, because we got to get on to the Rams now. We have a lot to talk about.
We love a good full circle moment. We do.
We do.
Absolutely.
We love to see it.
Sometimes you have to take a step back and you're like, okay, this is happening. This is cool. But with the Rams, and you have been pretty much running around doing all sorts of research. I mean, it's incredible, honestly. I know I've told you many times, you just do incredible work. One of the best beat writers I've ever seen. Like, you get down to the nitty gritty, like the stuff on Justin Hollins. We had him on the show, before he was drafted, and we knew some of the stuff, but then when, you add that extra intel that you got, from doing that work, those are the things that, I think all Rams fans are really going to appreciate about you, moving forward, and obviously now. But right off the bat, what is your biggest takeaway about this team so far as a beat writer for the Rams?
Ooh, good question. I'm glad you asked that, because they're remarkably cohesive. That's a vibe that you don't usually catch that quickly in terms of usually it does take a full spring for guys to get on the same page, especially they have so many new bodies. They are extremely cohesive. I think that's a credit to how Sean McVay runs practices. Guys are interacting with each other a lot. There was more competitive periods, I think, than a normal training camp would have, in terms of the 7-on-7 work, the 9-on-7, the 11-on-11, the 7-on-9, all of these different competitive periods. I know you guys know all about the Mamba period that they do as well. Lots and lots of competitive periods that what those do is not only do they prepare people to get them all on the same page, particularly in a truncated space of time, but what they also do is they build camaraderie, because you're getting as close as you can get to sort of that battle when you're in the trench with somebody on the field on Sundays or Thursdays or Mondays or whatever the hell day. It's like you really start building that rapport and that trust in somebody, and they managed to do that extremely quickly, which I thought was very, very impressive. Obviously a lot still to see how it will work and where the pieces will be on Sunday, but that is something very, very noticeable from this group. Very cohesive, working efficiently. The first week, I would say offense was a little bit of concern there in terms of the mistakes that were being made. But then once they got it together, things started functioning the way that you would expect things to function. And that's a product of competing against each other in those live periods as often as they did.
Yeah. And, I just kind of want to ask you, and this is kind of a question here that I think as, seasons go by in the NFL, everybody uses the word identity. Do you have an identity? What is your identity? What do you expect this team's identity to be, as we move forward through the season?
That's a good question, because I don't think that you have just one. That's my sort of policy when it comes to covering these teams. Like, I think the identity you start with is usually not what you finish with. You really, in the months of November, usually that entire period is when you really find out who you are as a football team. And it might even take a little bit longer this year because of how, like we said, like how truncated everything is. But yeah, I think if the bottom line is they're coming into a really weird season very, very cohesively. And so their identity could be high-powered offense. Their identity could very well be, attacking, takeaway-oriented defense, which, judging by the secondary, could very well be the case. But at the same time, I think that you try on different clothing, essentially, as a team throughout the course of a season. And as long as you're not making too many mistakes you can't get yourself out of them, I think that whatever identity you have established by trying on all of these shirts and pants and hats and whatever you get to by November, you are stuck with. So that's the identity you push with. And so I think that something, and I'm getting a little bit tangential here, but something that I'm excited to write about and to really study is how quickly you can shed an identity that's not working for you, how quickly you can pivot into something that will work for you, and how few mistakes you can make along the way. I think that will be really the mark of what this team can establish itself as in November, December.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And something that I am curious about is, the rookies in camp this season so far, because something that has always been, I think, really valuable, not only to sports fans, but people working in sports media and whoever, is the NFL preseason. That really gives us a chance to kind of see rookies, undrafted free agents, people like that play in the games. And we haven't been able to have that. So we've really kind of had to rely on people who have been at camp, been in practice, and seen it firsthand. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts and comments about how the rookies have fared so far in camp.
So I think it's okay to be excited about them. And I would normally be like, okay, guys, we don't know until we know. Like, I'm very non-take. I'm very non-hot take over here. So, but the thing that I think is really telling is a lot of them got opportunities early. And I would say the bulk of the class, majority of the class got opportunities very early, whether it was to injury, Taylor Rapp being out, so Jordan Fuller and Terrell Burgess get in. Cam Akers is kind of tasked with carrying quite a load on his shoulders this year. Van Jefferson's emergence. Even Tremaine Ingram, I think, is a very, very key depth piece moving forward for the Rams. Terrell Lewis injury aside, you really expect him to factor in. So this is something where they are what you thought they would be, and then they're better so far on paper. And I think it's okay to be excited about them, because part of the benefit, which you never want anyone to be hurt, obviously, but there was no other way you're going to get these other guys in and repping. And because they were forced into that situation early, they got to show that they could excel under duress, and particularly the two safeties. And I think that's really, really important, because now you see, okay, we obviously can't go out and buy high profile free agents anymore because of the contract restrictions we have. And we're tight. We're going to be tight down the road unless we make some really tough decisions. So we need to draft correctly, and we need to develop correctly. And then we didn't have a spring to do it. So, it's kind of a best case scenario that those guys did get in early without too many serious injuries happening to guys ahead of them. And then they were able to really get those reps in and then show really what I think is some truly high potential with this class.
Yeah, I mean, Alexis and I can tell you right now, we did a live draft stream, during the draft for DTR. And I mean, this draft class just blew us away in a sense. Definitely me. I felt like this was the best one I've seen in recent memory. Just to go out and get guys like Akers and, obviously, Jefferson, a guy that I saw at the Senior Bowl. Terrell Burgess, somebody that we had already spoken with throughout the process, and Terrell Lewis, kind of up in the air health wise, but obviously, the talent's, there. And Bryson Hopkins, to me, I think he was the best tight end in the draft. So I don't know how he fell to the fourth round. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. When I spoke to him in Mobile, he said that he met with the Rams and they really envisioned a tandem of him and Tyler Higbee. He got really excited talking about that. So I had kind of a weird feeling that he would end up with the Rams, and he did. With that being said, many have said that he had a quiet camp to this point, and that there was even a few people, that I've seen out there that were saying, they wouldn't be surprised if he necessarily got cut. Bryson Hopkins to me was a lock to make the roster, and I think he was to you as well. What can you say about his camp overall? Because it seems to me like, people were really quick to say he had a quiet camp, and it just, maybe there wasn't a lot going on. And I know with Gerald Everett in a contract year, I feel like the Rams also kind of want to showcase him a little bit. One, just in case, they were going to trade him at any point this season. And two, it's only going to boost his value if they're willing to move on with him at the end of the year. And this is a GM, of course, that plays for comp picks. So, what were your thoughts on Bryson Hopkins during camp?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's so many nuances with Bryson here that I think are really important. And you did touch on some of them. One, he was never going to get cut. He's a 4th round pick. He's never going to get cut. Even if he came into camp and then just sat down in the middle of the field during a live scrimmage and picked dandelions, like he's not getting cut, right? But he didn't do that. The reason you didn't hear about him was because he wasn't making mistakes. You have Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee, who are clearly your first teamers. As I reported, the days run together. I guess it was over the weekend. They're not trading Gerald Everett, at least right now. And so the thing is you need to onboard those guys because you didn't see them all spring and you got very limited rep sessions in with Jared Goff. So you got to onboard Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett because you're going to come out of the gate probably running a lot of 12 personnel like immediately to try and push defenses back on their heels because you're banking on defenses not being in as good of a shape as normal. So you're going to run a lot of 12 on them, right? So you have to get those guys onboarded and ready to go. So Brycen Hopkins is getting at first a couple of developmental reps, like every single rookie from your early picks to your late ones. You start out getting developmental reps, and then you work in with the second team, and then you do a lot of install work. The tight ends in Sean McVay's offense, it is so crucial that you get that install work in. So you're not going to always have, the highlight reel moments where you're repping in the live periods because you are installing because you're very much a part of the future. So with Brycen, I definitely heard it too. People were like, whoa, is he still there? Like, what's he doing? And I was like, well, he's not messing up. That's important. Like he's really not, he's not making any errors or any egregious mistakes. You definitely could see him flashing the athleticism. And I do think he is a future sort of chess piece for them because ultimately he saves them money in one way or another, whether they opt out after 2020. Tyler Higbee's got an out clause in his contract after 2020. So if the production isn't there, they have an out with very little of a hit to themselves. Or, if you decide you can't pay Gerald Everett long-term, which is probably the more likely option, then you have the Higbee, Brycen Hopkins tandem. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised to see them work him in a little bit in red zone situations this year, just to kind of, get his throat wet a little bit with what it's like to actually, be in the league, be against guys who are moving that fast, those kinds of things. So, you definitely noticed a lot of those good nuances with Brycen. For me, I think he had a great camp, but again, like he didn't mess up. And that's really what you want from somebody who you're keeping because you invested that much draft capital. Especially, you have to hit on those picks. You cannot miss those picks. If you don't have a first round pick, you cannot you cannot miss between rounds 2 through 4. So that was something. And then they had a much higher grade on him than his draft spot would indicate. So I think, and honestly, now I'm getting tangential again, guys, but really they had a higher draft grade on a lot of the guys they were able to get at lower picks. And so I think that's also really, really important in terms of what value they're going to get, especially when a lot of those rookies are going to have to play some serious reps this year.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point, and especially on the point, with Brycen Hopkins being a 4th round pick and everything. I never bought into the fact that he was going to get cut. I mean, like you said, I don't think there's anything that Brycen Hopkins could do on the field that would get him cut from the team when you're picked that high. It just doesn't happen. Speaking of cuts, over the weekend, we saw all the NFL teams kind of finalize their 53-man roster, and there was a lot of cuts that were made, players being added to practice squads and whatnot. Were you surprised by any of the cuts that the Rams decided to make, or were you surprised with any of the practice squad additions?
That's a good question. I don't think I was surprised by any of the roster makes. I do think that I'd like to see more of Eric Banks because I'm going to be honest with you guys, you don't need to do a whole lot of time watching the defensive line at practice because you just know they're very good. So I would like to spend more time watching him now that we're kind of moving into the real thing. I really like his development potential. After I saw that he made it, I went back and studied him a little bit, and he's got some good development potential there. He eats space really well, which I think they sometimes miss. The other thing is I think I was pleased on their behalf that they were able to sneak Bryce Perkins and Christian Rotzboom under the waiver wire the way that they did. They did it very savvily. They released them, with the big mass wave of cuts as everyone's scrambling and sitting on waivers and trying to figure out like, okay, which one person can we add? There was a pretty substantial worry that Christian Rotzboom would not make it through waivers. So the fact that they have him on there is really good. And obviously after week 1, you can now tell based on your depth that you have at inside linebacker whether you need to promote him or not. You'd obviously like to wait until he's developed a little bit more before you do that. But if they really need him, there's the sense that they could promote him if they had to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that you brought that up. And I loved when you started talking about Roseboom, like right before the 53 came out, because I was a big fan of his. Blaine Grisak, a writer of our website, downtownrams.com, was, he, I think, had the best looking tape out of everybody I watched on the defensive side of the ball for all of the UDFAs. So I tend to agree with you in that regard. And I was really excited to have him back. And Bryce Perkins, I mean, I watched him at Virginia, and, we actually had him on the show as well. Big fan of his game. He kind of reminds me a little bit of a Donovan McNabb, the way he's able to work off schedule. And I mean, he's really fast. I think he ran like a 4.5. It's crazy what he's been through because he broke his neck. And he's actually, you're from Arizona. He went to Arizona Christian, I think. He went to
No, he went to Arizona State, which is my alma mater, and then he transferred. Thank you very much. And he also is from Chandler, Arizona, which is where my hometown. So yeah, I know Bryce, and he's a great dude. And he went to the high school that kicked the absolute crap out of my high school every single year. And he is just a really special kid. So I am extremely, extremely glad. There is a little, Chandler, Arizona pride going on there. And I admitted even on Twitter, I was like, guys, I'm completely biased covering this guy, but let me tell you, he's special. So, I stand by that. I think he's really, really talented. And he's a guy who, they were elated that they could pick him up as an undrafted free agent. They were even more elated when they could sneak him under waivers. And he's in a great situation here because he will absolutely compete for that QB2 role when he has a full spring to actually get his feet under him and actually get some competitive reps in. They just didn't have any opportunity to compete. They just had to establish QB2 right away. And then that's not a knock on John Walford. I think he's doing really well, and he's pretty exciting to watch. But when you get Bryce Perkins a full spring to actually compete for the job, I think you're going to see some fireworks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, we're huge Bryce Perkins fans. I think this is my favorite quarterback room they've had in recent memory. So there's a lot of things I like that they've had in recent memory. With that being said, though, talking about the practice squad a little bit, I just want to get your thoughts on who you think will end up being the 4 practice squad players that the Rams opt to protect.
Well, first and foremost, I hope that they exercise the option, because you always have the option of not doing it. And so I do hope that they use it sort of as a strategy. I think that would be really, really smart. I don't think they should sort of tweak the bottom of the squad a little bit. I don't think they should bring in like a kicker, for example, and protect him. That would do a lot to sort of wreck the confidence, because you have a rookie who made the 53. So I think they're set in that regard. I would absolutely protect Bryce Perkins just in case. I would absolutely protect Christian Roseboom just in case. And then I would probably do like 2 offensive linemen, or maybe like an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. And I think probably a favorite there, although I know that some Rams fans might groan when they hear this, but I think Jamil Demby is probably a favorite to protect there, because he does know the system. He's been around the block a couple times. So in a pinch, in case of a catastrophe, you might have to go that direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, Rams fans definitely kind of have mixed opinions on Demby, myself included, but I do understand the sentiment, and I do think that it would be smart to keep him around. Like you said, he knows the system. He's been there a while. But this next question is just kind of interesting to ask Rams fans and people who have vested interest in the Rams, and especially someone like you who's had a chance to, see them in person. But if you had to select a breakout player on each side of the football for the Rams for this upcoming season, who would you pick?
God, I love being on with you guys. You guys are asking me all these good questions. Okay, well, Van Jefferson, obviously. I mean, he's like, that guy is amazing. So I think he's going to be a star. I really do. Like anybody can quote me on that. I don't care. Like, I think he's going to be an absolute star. And, I loved watching him work against Jalen Ramsey, and it looks like we're going to see a little bit more of that during Hard Knocks this week, which might be like the only valuable thing Hard Knocks will do this season. So I think that's going to be really, really fun to watch. And breakout, that's a great question on defense. Ooh, that's tough, because then can they be a veteran or do they have to be a rookie?
Anybody.
Okay. Well, I think Troy Hill, actually. And I know that he kind of broke out outside corner last year, but I don't know if I'm allowed to like report this, but whatever. I think, they're going to work him at nickel a lot. And from what I've seen at practice, he is really, really thriving in that role. And so I think that especially in some of those smaller sub packages that they do, and they're going to have to play a lot of big nickel and small nickel in terms of, what they're doing to sort of combat the fact that they're really thin at inside linebacker. So you have to play more nickel and dime to sort of help alleviate that. So I think you're going to see more nickel, and you're going to see a lot of guys rotating in and out of those packages. Troy Hill is one I would absolutely watch at that position.
I love that you said that, because Jake is the biggest Troy Hill stan that there is on the planet.
Oh, good.
And
I passed the test.
Yeah. So Jake, how are you feeling about that?
I feel great. I mean, Troy Hill is somebody that, like, everyone looks at him like, oh, he bounced around the Bengals and the Patriots cut him for a reason. But I'm like, he like, I don't know. There were times like he annoyed me at times because I felt like he could be a lot better. And he would, he was caught guessing a lot early on in his Rams career, but they stuck with him. And there's a reason why they gave him that, 2-year deal instead of giving, Kevin Peterson and guys along that nature, that run. And he made the most of it, in my opinion, just seeing, he really took charge of that role last year, I thought. And it's really good to hear you say that, Jourdan, because it doesn't surprise me at all. And, I think that's the reason, like, the Rams were able to keep only 4 corners. They didn't feel obligated to keep 5 or 6 because they had, Troy Hill, Ramsey, Darius Williams, the guy that they stole from the Baltimore Ravens, trying to sneak him onto the practice squad when Jimmy Smith had to be taken off IR. I just think like things like that, like they're so depth filled in the secondary. It makes me really excited to see that. But my biggest concern with this team, and I think you know where I'm going with this, is linebacker, because like Alexis gave me this big like title of Troy Hill stan, but you'd basically take that and times that by 1 billion, and that's me with Corey Littleton. So the Rams let him go, and they are very inexperienced. I think the most experience that they have, I think they have 14 combined NFL starts on the inside linebacker position. And in that room, the most experienced is actually the guy that gets a lot of flack from Rams fans, Troy Reeder, with 8 starts. I want to get your thoughts on, this inside linebacker group.
Yeah, so I really loved Corey Littleton's game as well. And I was very fortunate to get to be in a place for the last 4 years where you learn a lot more about the nuances of linebackers in general in the game, whether it's a 4-3 or 3-4, Ron Rivera being one of the Chicago linebackers, and then Luke Kuechly being there, Thomas Davis. But one of the things that you learn is if you are working in a 3-4 or a 3-3-5, which I think you'll see quite a bit, is the second one, because they want to keep that 3-man front, but they also really they're going to need to be a nickel a lot. So I think off-ball linebacker becomes a lot less crucial. It's technically the least quote unquote valuable when you're looking at data sets and analytics, the least valuable position on the defense for a defense that sort of has its elements rooted in Vic Fangio. Brandon Staley kind of pulls a lot from that. So that's actually not something I'm as concerned about. And I might regret this later. We just don't know. But I'm not very concerned about that position. I think when you do look at the way that they sort of have not filled, they did not feel the emergency need of pulling up Christian Rotzboom to add depth. They instead brought in a hybrid guy, Justin Hollins, inside-outside guy, who will probably early on fill more depth on the outside because we don't know how long Terrell Lewis will be out. And so that shows to me that not only are they doubling down on playing more nickel to sort of fill up that space in the middle of the field, and they have smaller bodies and bigger bodies who can play that either, they call it Buffalo nickel in Carolina. I'm not sure what they call it here, star package or something. You have a bigger body. You can sort of be a linebacker safety hybrid when you aren't covering a slot receiver from there, right? So I think actually they might be okay in that regard. They did keep Jordan Fuller and Terrell Burgess. On the one hand, Jordan Fuller can play corner if he has to, but he also is going to rotate into that big nickel spot. And then Terrell Burgess is absolutely going to rotate into that big nickel spot when he has to. Even Jalen Ramsey, especially against the George Kittles and the Greg Olsons, can rotate into that big nickel spot. So again, you're really offering that extra help in the middle layers of the field that I'm not as concerned about their off-ball linebackers. I think they're going to what they need to do is not make mistakes and not miss tackles. So Troy Reeder, I know, has been up and down. Micah Kaiser, I think, has a lot of talent. I actually covered Troy for a year at Penn State, and he was actually the best tackler on the team. So I'm hoping he kind of gets back to that a little bit. And I think they really like playing in this scheme that Brandon Staley has presented them. But, that's actually not a huge concern of mine. I think this defense is super underrated. As in fact, I think the biggest unknown is how will Brandon Staley call it? And then can they sort of stop these outside zone runs that hurt them so much? But I really think this defense is super underrated. Like, sort of on paper, depth in the middle looks a little concerning, but the ways that they're going to work around it, I think, are really exciting.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up Justin Hollins, because I was wanting to ask, in your opinion, how much playing time do you think we see out of him this weekend? And also, do you think that we might see a little bit of Ja'Kai Polite? And then on top of that, really quickly, I also wanted to ask, the Josh Reynolds over Van Jefferson debate. Who do you think is going to be the third receiver in the game Sunday night?
Yeah, both great questions. So I don't know that you'll see a ton of either. You'll probably see both of them rotate in for snaps. The thing that I wonder is how they're going to manufacture sacks on the outside. I have no concern about doing it up the middle. Obviously, when you have a team with Aaron Donald on it, you just don't worry about those things. But, around the outside and off the edge, I think you're going to see them experimenting a little bit. Leonard Floyd obviously is going to get the lion's share here. Samson Ebukam. They're going to be like a speed power complement, which I think is exciting. I think you need that, especially if you've been sort of figured out in the past off the edge. And then I think you're going to see a little bit of a rotation. Ja'Kai Polite came along physically, I think, more so than I expected, hearing about him and sort of on paper, seeing his journey prior to this. I was curious about him, and I'm looking forward to talking to him more because I'm curious, obviously, about the mental journey as well of everything he's sort of been through the past year. But he certainly passes the eye test in terms of sort of that long, speed. Probably not a ton of power there, but definitely got the bend, definitely's got the length. So I could see him rotating in. Justin Hollins, he is getting a jersey, but I'm not really sure how much they'll use him just because he is still, relatively newer to the system. But if you see him a lot, it means that he's around for the long term because if you see him a lot, then that means Brandon Staley is immediately putting complete trust and faith in that guy. And then to your next excellent question, I don't know. I don't really categorize these guys as wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4. I say you have 2 1s and then 2 2s, right? I think that you have 2 1s in Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp just based on the importance that they hold for how the offense runs and how the engine goes in general. And then your 2 2s, they kind of work in complement. They do different things. So like Van Jefferson, he's running a full tree, so he's going to be all over the field. You'll see him everywhere. Josh Reynolds, I think you'll see more situationally. So I wouldn't say it's like one's taking snaps away from the other, or one is, one has lapped the other on the depth chart. I would more say like if you see the defense, like let's say they're doing a lot of short field stuff with Cooper Kupp out of the slot. and a lot of like passes out of the backfield, especially if Jared Goff's under pressure. Well, the defense will start playing him tighter. And at that case, you want to really open up Josh Reynolds and stretch the field out, right? Because they're not going to be expecting that because they're playing you too close. Well, the opposite's true too. If you stretch the field a couple times, then you really want to work underneath using Van Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods all versatilely and sort of orbiting around Jared Goff in a variation of alignments. So it just kind of really depends on what happens. And I think they have such a good problem on their hands in terms of you have too many good receivers who are underrated, and now you have to throw the ball a hell of a lot so that you can get the ball to all of them. And then, you have 2 tight ends who are going to catch the ball a lot. So, again, I'm rambling because I get really excited about this stuff, but it's a great question. I don't think that they will take away anything from each other. I just think that you'll see more week to week from 1 or 2 of the guys, depending on the situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jourdan, it's been a total pleasure. We could keep on going all night, obviously.
I know this is my fault, but I love talking to you guys.
We know that you are busy. I'll ask you one quick question. I was going to ask you about the running back room, but I don't think we have enough time. So I'll ask you, how do you see this Rams-Cowboys game going?
Dude, the Rams are going to win. No, I think it's so disrespectful to have them as dogs in their own house in the opener. Are you kidding me? That's so disrespectful.
I hear you.
So,
I'm 100%.
Yeah, so I think I'll say this. This is as close to a hot take as I'll get. So,
let's hear it.
I do think the Rams will win, and I think it's going to come down to coaching, and I think Sean McVay is going to win that over Mike McCarthy any day of the week with his eyes closed, blindfolded, no numbers on the backs of the jerseys, going to win that battle.
Oh, yeah.
I think Aaron Rodgers would agree with you. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Jourdan, you're welcome anytime. We'd love to have you on periodically throughout the year, but we know you're busy, so we won't hold that against you. When you can come on, we appreciate it. But hey, that's going to do it for us. This has been episode 309 of the Downtown Rams podcast. Jake Ellenbogen, Alexis Kraft, and our special guest, Jourdan Rodrigue, signing off. Take care, guys. Go Rams.